The city was dry like an endless desert. The once proud towers of stone were broken, and the streets were filled with dust and silence. Water was not only rare, it was guarded like treasure. Only the powerful had enough, while the poor lived. On drops in the shadow of a crumbling wall, a young alien girl with green skin crept forward. Her silver hair was tangled, her clothes torn from long days of struggle. She held an empty pouch in her hand, her throat burning with thirst. Behind her, in a hidden corner, her family waited. Their lips cracked, their eyes weak. They had not tasted real water in days. She knew what she was about to do was dangerous, but her family's lives were slipping away. The guards had no mercy. Thieves who stole water were punished in front of crowds, sometimes losing a hand, sometimes worse. Yet she pushed her fear aside. Tonight she would try. She watched the guarded compound from a distance. A fountain inside glimmered with clear, shining water. It was not a fountain for beauty. It was storage for the rulers, protected by chains and heavy locks. 2 armored guards stood near, their eyes scanning the dark alleys. The girl's heart pounded. She waited until their backs turned, then she slipped through a broken gate. Her feet were silent on the ground. Her hands trembled as she approached the container. She leaned down, dipped her pouch into the cool water, and for the first time in weeks, she felt the relief of hope. The sound of the pouch filling was like music. But then, the alarm rang. A sharp metallic sound echoed through the compound. The girl froze. Her heart stopped. The water pouch slipped in her hands. Guards rushed in, their boots heavy on the stone. She tried to run, but rough hands grabbed her, pulling her down. Her knees scraped the ground as she was dragged toward the punishment block. The crowd gathered quickly. The noise had spread, and people came from their homes. Some looked with pity, some with fear. None dared to help. They all knew the punishment. The guard with a scar across his face shouted, "Thief!" His voice was cold like iron. He pulled her arm forward and forced it down onto the block of stone. The surface was rough, stained from many punishments before. The girl cried out, struggling. Her small body shook. She begged for mercy, but the guards only laughed. The executioner stepped forward. He was tall, covered in black armor. His hands gripped the handle of a massive blade. The blade was sharp, shining in the torchlight. He lifted it high into the air. The crowd gasped. Some closed their eyes, waiting for the sound. The girl's breath came fast. Her eyes filled with tears. She thought of her mother, her younger brother. She thought of the thirst that would take them all. She thought this would be the end. Her arm was pinned, the blade ready to fall. Then a voice cut through the noise, firm and steady. "Stop!" The crowd turned. The guards looked up, and from the shadows of the alley, a man stepped forward. He was human, tall and strong. His eyes burned with anger. His clothes were worn, but his stance carried power. The guards snarled, "Outsider! Do not interfere." But the human did not stop. He walked closer. His presence alone silenced the whispers. He looked directly at the executioner, then at the girl. His hand clenched into a fist. "She is only a child stealing water," he said, his voice like thunder. "This is no crime worth such a punishment." The executioner's blade hung in the air. The crowd shifted uneasily. No one had ever dared to challenge the law. No one had ever stood between the council's rules and the people's suffering. The girl looked up at him, her breath shaking. For the first time in her life, she saw someone defy the power of the guards. For the first time she saw hope. The air was heavy with silence. The blade still hung above her arm. The guards glared at the human, ready to strike him down. The crowd waited, wondering what would happen. And in that moment, between fear and courage, the fate of the girl, and perhaps the fate of the whole city, began to change. The executioner's blade still hovered in the air, the crowd holding its breath. The human stood tall, his shadow stretching across the dusty ground. His eyes were sharp and filled with fire. He had spoken a word that no one else dared to speak to the guards. "Stop." The guards tightened their grip on the girl. One of them snarled, "This thief has broken the law." "Outsider, this is not your fight." But the human did not move back. Instead, he stepped forward. Slow and steady, his boots pressed against the dirt with weight and meaning. The people in the crowd whispered among themselves. Some were afraid, some were curious. They had never seen anyone, not even another alien, stand against the armored guards. The alien girl felt her heart racing. Her arms still pressed against the block, her skin burning from fear. Yet when she looked up at the human, she felt something else: safety. The scarred guard raised his spear, pointing it at the man's chest. "Step back or share her fate," he threatened. His voice was sharp like steel. The executioner's blade trembled slightly in the air, waiting for the command, but the human's voice came again, strong and calm. "She is not a criminal. She is a child. She was only thirsty." His words echoed, bouncing off the broken stone walls. The silence that followed was heavier than the desert heat. The alien girl blinked, stunned. Never in her life had someone spoken for her. The crowd began to murmur. Some looked down in shame, others looked at the human with eyes wide in disbelief. The guards laughed, though their laughter was forced. "You speak foolish words, human," one said. "Water is life, and stealing life demands a price." The human shook his head. His jaw was set like stone. "No," he said. "Water is not life if only the rulers can drink. Water belongs to all. She deserves mercy." The executioner lowered the blade slightly, unsure. The law was strict, but there was something in the human's voice, something powerful. The scarred guard hissed, "Do not listen. He is weak. He is foreign. He has no right here." The human stepped closer. His hand clenched at his side, but he did not draw a weapon. His strength was not in steel, but in his presence. His eyes locked on the executioner. "If you strike her down, then you strike me too," he declared. Gasps filled the crowd. The girl's lips parted, her chest rising quickly. She could not believe what she was hearing. This man, a stranger, was willing to face death for her. The guards stiffened. Their hands tightened on their weapons, but none moved. The weight of his words had unsettled them. The people in the crowd now stared with wide eyes. Their whispers grew louder. Hope, small but real, began to spread like sparks. The executioner, a warrior known for never hesitating, looked into the human's eyes. He had cut down many before, but this was different. The human's gaze did not shake. His voice did not tremble. The executioner's arm paused. The scarred guard shouted angrily, trying to break the silence. "Then let him face the council," he barked. "If he wants to defend this thief, let him defend her in front of the rulers." The executioner lowered the blade fully. The girl collapsed to her knees, sobbing in shock, her arms still attached, her life still her own. The guards dragged her up, binding her wrists with rough rope. The human did not resist when they seized him too. He allowed it, his face calm. The crowd parted as the guards led them away. The whispers turned into soft shouts. "A human," someone said. "He spoke against the law." Another voice added, "He stood for her. He stood against them." The girl stumbled as she was pushed forward. Her wrists burned from the ropes. But her eyes never left the human walking beside her. He gave her a small nod, silent but steady. And somehow, she believed she was no longer alone. They were taken through the dark streets, toward the towering chamber of the alien council. The building loomed like a mountain of stone and fire. Torches lined its gates. The people watched from their windows, curious and afraid. Inside, the chamber was vast. High pillars carved with alien symbols rose into the air. At the center stood a circle of seats, each filled with a ruler dressed in fine robes, their eyes cold, their hands heavy with rings. The council of elders. The guards threw the girl onto the floor. She gasped as her knees hit the cold stone. The human was forced to kneel beside her, but even on his knees, his back was straight, his head held high. The eldest counselor, with silver horns and a robe that glittered, spoke. "You dare to interfere with our law. Human," his voice rolled like thunder. "You stand for a thief who tried to steal from us. Why?" The human's voice was clear. Because she was thirsty, because her family is dying, because your law is cruel. His words echoed, sharp and fearless. The council chamber fell into silence. The rulers exchanged glances. Some frowned, others smirked. One finally leaned forward. If you believe she deserves mercy, then you must prove it, outsider. The girl's heart raced. She looked at the council, then at the human. She whispered, "They will not let us go." But he only gave her a firm glance, silent but full of promise. The eldest counselor raised a hand. "There will be a trial, a test of strength and spirit. If you succeed, the girl will live. If you fail, both of you will pay the price." The crowd in the chamber erupted in noise. Some cheered, some laughed. The guards smirked, confident that no outsider could survive the council's trials. The human simply nodded, his jaw tight. "Then I accept," he said. The girl stared at him, stunned. She could not understand why. She could not understand how a stranger, a human, would risk everything for her. Yet she felt a spark of hope deep inside, something she had never felt before. And as the guards dragged them away to prepare for the trial, the girl realized that her life, her city, and maybe even her world would never be the same again. The council chamber was silent except for the crackle of torches. The alien rulers stared down at the human and the girl, their eyes filled with cold judgment. The girl's wrists were bound with rough rope, her knees pressed against the hard stone floor. The human, though also forced to kneel, kept his head high, refusing to bow. The eldest counselor, his horns long and twisted like roots of a dead tree, leaned forward. "Outsider, you dare to stand against our laws," his voice rumbled. "You protect a thief, knowing the price is death. Why should we allow such disrespect?" The human's voice was calm but sharp. "Because your laws are cruel. A child should not lose her life for a sip of water. Water is for all, not only for the rich." His words echoed through the vast chamber. The guards shifted uneasily, and even some of the crowd watching from the gallery murmured. The counselors whispered among themselves. Some laughed at the human's boldness. Others narrowed their eyes with suspicion. Finally one spoke, his robe lined with silver threads. "If you wish to challenge our law, then prove your strength. Prove your spirit." He pointed a clawed finger at the human. "You will face the trial of ordeals." The girl gasped. She had heard of the trial. No outsider had ever survived. It was not one test, but many, a mix of strength, courage, and wit. The punishment for failure was death, not only for the challenger, but also for the one he defended. The human's jaw tightened. He did not flinch. "I accept," he said. His voice did not shake. The crowd in the gallery erupted. Some jeered. "He will die in the first test." Others whispered, "He is mad. No one challenges the council." The guards smirked, dragging the girl and the human out of the chamber. The trial would begin at dawn. That night, the girl sat in a small cell, her wrists raw from the rope, her heart pounded with fear. She looked at the human who sat calmly across from her, his back straight, his eyes steady. She finally whispered, "Why do this for me? I am nothing to you." The human looked at her, his face serious but kind. "Because no one should suffer for thirst. Because someone must stand, and today, that someone is me." The girl's eyes filled with tears. She had lived her whole life believing mercy did not exist. Now, sitting across from this strange human, she felt something new: hope. Morning came with the sound of heavy drums. The trial was to be held in the great arena, a circle of stone, surrounded by high walls and filled with thousands of citizens. The air buzzed with excitement. For many, this was not justice but entertainment. The girl was forced into a small cage near the edge of the arena. She clutched the bars, her eyes locked on the human. The guards pushed him into the center, his hands free, his body bare of armor. Only the scars of past battles marked his skin. He stood tall, facing the council seated high above on their thrones. The eldest counselor raised his hand. "The trial of ordeals begins." His voice boomed. "Outsider, if you survive all tests, the girl shall be freed. Fail, and both of you shall die. The first challenge was strength. From the gates of the arena, 3 massive alien beasts lumbered out. Their bodies covered in scales, their mouths filled with rows of teeth. Chains rattled around their necks as handlers released them. The crowd roared. The beasts charged, their claws digging into the sand. The human braced himself. His mind raced. He could not fight them with brute strength alone. He waited until the first beast lunged, its jaws snapping. At the last second, he rolled aside, grabbing a broken spear from the sand. With a swift move, he jammed it into the beast's eye. The monster shrieked, collapsing in pain. The crowd gasped. The girl clung to the bars, her heart pounding. The other 2 beasts circled, their tails whipping. The human breathed hard but stood firm. He moved quickly, using the fallen beast's body as a shield. When the second creature leaped, it slammed into its wounded kin. Crashing into the sand, the human struck fast, smashing its jaw with the spear. The final beast roared, larger than the rest. It charged. The human dropped the spear and ran toward the wall. The crowd laughed, thinking he fled, but at the last second, he leapt, pushing off the stone, and landed on the beast's back. His hands gripped its thick neck. His arm wrapped around its throat. The creature thrashed, but the human held on with all his strength until it collapsed, choking in the dust. Silence fell over the arena. The crowd was stunned. The human, covered in dirt and blood, stood victorious. He raised his fist into the air. The girl shouted from her cage, tears running down her cheeks. The human had passed the first ordeal, but the council was not satisfied. The eldest counselor rose, his eyes narrow. "Strength is only the beginning, outsider," he said. "Next, we test your spirit." The girl's heart sank. She knew the next ordeal would not be about strength, but about breaking his will. And she feared that the council would use her as the weapon to do it. The drums pounded again. The trial was far from over. The human breathed deeply, steadying himself. He knew this was only the start, and as the gates opened once more, he prepared for whatever came next. The arena floor was still stained with the blood of the beasts. The crowd murmured, whispering about the human's victory. None had expected him to survive, yet he stood tall, his chest heaving but his spirit unbroken. The girl pressed her hands against the bars of her cage, her eyes wide with both fear and pride. The eldest counselor lifted his hand, his long sleeve falling back to reveal clawed fingers. "The second ordeal begins now," he announced. His voice boomed across the arena. "This is not a test of muscle, but of spirit. Let us see if the human's will can endure what his body has survived." The drums thundered again. The ground beneath the arena shifted. A platform rose from the sand, carrying strange objects, mirrors of dark glass, chains carved with glowing symbols, and a tall crystal that pulsed with a faint light. The crowd fell silent, for they knew what was coming. The girl's heart sank. She had heard whispers of this ordeal. It was called the trial of the mind, a test that broke warriors without a blade. The human looked at the objects calmly, but his eyes narrowed. He could feel the power in the crystal. 2 robed figures stepped forward, their faces hidden behind golden masks. They began to chant in a low, echoing language. The crystal glowed brighter, sending waves of strange energy across the arena. The human staggered, his vision blurring. The crowd faded from his sight. The arena itself seemed to melt away suddenly. He was no longer standing on sand, but in the middle of a desert wasteland. The air shimmered with heat. He looked down and saw his hands empty. He turned, searching for the girl. But she was gone. A voice echoed in his mind, cold and sharp. "You cannot save her. You cannot save anyone. You are weak." The human clenched his fists. He recognized the trick. This was not real. It was the council's trial. They wanted to crush his will with illusions, but the voice grew louder. "You have left your people behind. You fight for strangers. Why, they will betray you." The desert twisted into a battlefield. Bodies of fallen soldiers lay at his feet, men and women he once knew. He saw their faces, saw their blood. His chest tightened. guilt pressing heavy on him. The voice whispered, "You could not save them then. You cannot save her now." The human fell to one knee, gripping the sand. His mind fought against the weight of sorrow. He heard another voice, softer, trembling. "Please do not give up." It was the girl's voice, faint but clear. He looked up, and in the distance, he saw her standing with ropes around her wrists. Rose to his feet, forcing his legs to move. Every step was heavy as if the ground tried to swallow him. The battlefield shifted into a storm. Rain lashing down, lightning splitting the sky. Shadows formed around him, taking shape into warriors. Their eyes glowed red, weapons raised. The human fought them barehanded, his fists striking, his body moving with determination. Each shadow fell, but more came. His muscles ached, his breath short, yet he kept pushing. In his mind he shouted, "I will not fail her." Back in the real arena, the crowd watched as the human staggered, his body twisting as if fighting invisible foes. The robed figures chanted louder, trying to break him. The girl clung to the cage bars, shouting, "Fight, do not give up, you are not alone." Her voice carried, reaching him through the storm of illusions. The shadows around him faded, the battlefield crumbled away. He found himself again in the desert, the girl standing before him. She looked at him with wide, hopeful eyes. He reached out, grasping her hand. The moment he touched her, the illusions shattered. The human collapsed to his knees on the arena floor, sweat pouring down his face. His chest rose and fell heavily, but his eyes burned with fire. He had endured. He had beaten the trial of the mind. The crystal dimmed. The robed figures staggered back in shock. The crowd erupted into shouts. Some cheered. Others cried out in disbelief. No outsider had ever broken free from the illusions. The counselors leaned forward, their faces dark with anger. The eldest slammed his clawed hand onto the armrest. "This is not over," he growled. "You have survived strength. You have endured spirit, but the final ordeal still awaits." The girl cried out, her voice breaking. "He has proven himself. Let him go. Let me go." But the council did not listen. Their pride was wounded, and their control threatened. The human stood again, his body trembling but his stance unbroken. He looked up at the council and said, "No matter what you put before me, I will not yield." His voice carried through the arena, strong and steady. The crowd was no longer silent. Whispers of rebellion spread. Some shouted for freedom, others cursed the council's cruelty. The seeds of doubt had been planted. The eldest counselor rose, his robe flowing like dark smoke. His eyes gleamed with fury, then faced the final ordeal outsider. He declared, "And let the galaxy witness your end." The drums pounded once more, louder than ever. The gates of the arena began to creak open, and a deep, earth-shaking roar rolled out from the darkness beyond. The girl gripped the bars tighter, her breath caught in her throat. She whispered to herself, "Please, let him survive, please." And as the shadow of a massive beast began to step into the light, the trial of strength and spirit reached its most dangerous test.